This is lesson number 1, part 1. The title of this video and lesson is O Lucifer, Son of the Morning. This is going to be part 1, after which there will be a part 2. The Bible of reference for this Bible study is the King James Version. Some of you are probably asking themselves why such an inappropriate name for a Bible study. The reason for this is because of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, which has its parallel in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12. Ideally in Bible mysteries, especially those related to the rapture of the church, the complex ones, mysteries very difficult to reveal. In this lesson, I will reveal one of them. And what I am referring to is that temple of God we read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. As written in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, that temple of God looks as a building, a structure. But there is a problem. Paul is calling it the temple of God, referring to it as a structure, as a building, an artificial structure. And many experts in the field of the rapture have interpreted that temple of God in verse 4 as being the third temple of Jerusalem, the future third temple. But this would be impossible if referring to the third temple of Jerusalem being called by God, by Paul, as the temple of God. For what reason? Very simple. Because there has never been a temple of God as an artificial, man-made structure on earth. We cannot have such a structure or building made by human hands and be called the temple of God. Because if we were to have something like that, then it would not only contradict, not only go against the New Testament, but even the Old Testament. An artificial structure made by human hands in this future, which is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, Paul is calling it the temple of God. Apparently as written, it seems like a temple on earth. And many experts in the field of the rapture have interpreted that temple in verse 4 as being the third temple of Jerusalem, which is, according to these interpretations, a man-made structure. As you can see in front of you, this chalkboard, which is a pretty big one, 2 meters long, it is filled with scripture verses. In order to solve Bible mysteries, especially of this complexity, I would need a big chalkboard. And I would have to write down as much verses as possible. Unfortunately, this would mean to write very small in order to fit all that material on this chalkboard. There is also another chalkboard right next to it. This would be lesson 1, part 2, next video. Here in this lesson, in this video, I will explain that whatever temple that is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 Verse 4, it could not possibly be the third temple of Jerusalem, the future temple of Jerusalem. As written, Paul refers to it as the temple of God, and many have interpreted, many so-called experts, have interpreted that temple as being the temple, the third temple of Jerusalem. The evidence is in these verses that that temple is not the third temple of Jerusalem, but yet another temple. It is a building, yes, but it's not the third temple of Jerusalem. And it is no temple on earth. Acts 17, verse 24. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. This verse alone already shows you that God does not dwell in artificial structures made by human hands. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, Paul is referring to some temple of God. He is referring to a building, but as Acts 17, verse 24 already shows you, it could not be an artificial structure made by human hands. Verse 25, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things. Verse 26, and hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. Verse 27, that they shall seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. Verse 28, for in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Verse 29, for as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold, silver, stone, graven by art and man's device. Verse 30, in the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent. Verse 31, because he hath appointed a day in the which he would judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, and that he hath raised him from the dead. So here in Acts 17, from verse 24, verse 25, verse 24 to verse 31, we see that that temple we read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, could not possibly be a human man-made structure. There was a time by which God permitted structures, temples made by human hands, but those times were ancient times. And it was permitted only in that time. From the time of Jesus Christ to our present time, stone structures on earth are no longer temples, or no longer dwelling places of God, not buildings or buildings of artificial, man-made device. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Here it speaks of yet another temple. Verse 17, if any man defy the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. Here it speaks of yet another temple. There was a time by which God dwelt in stone structures, but from the time of Jesus Christ to our present time, God dwells in the human, faithful, believing saint of the flesh. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 15. Know ye not that your bodies are the members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them the members of an harlot? God forbid. Verse 16. What know ye not that he which is joined to an harlot is one body? For two, said he, shall be one flesh. Verse 17. But he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. Verse 19. What know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? Verse 20. For ye are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Here it speaks of yet another temple, a dwelling place of God, which is the body of flesh. A time of stone temples, becoming then a time of the flesh of the faithful believer. But 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4 is referring to a building and not the human flesh. But where? That temple is being called the temple of God. If it's not on earth, that building, that structure, if not on earth, where is it? John chapter 2, verse 19. Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Here he is referring to his body as the temple of God. Hebrews 8, verse 1. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest which is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Here it speaks of yet another temple. But this one here is in the majesty of the heavens. Verse 2, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. The true tabernacle. The true temple of God, which is not found on earth. Acts chapter 7, verse 48. Howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands, as said the prophet. Verse 49, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What house will ye build me, said the Lord, or what is the place of my rest? Verse 50, hath not my hand made all these things? God does not dwell in temples made with hands. Of course, some would say he would not dwell in the third temple of Jerusalem either, being that temple in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Verse 4. But the problem is that Paul is referring to some temple and is calling it the temple of God. So it's not even the third temple of Jerusalem. Isaiah 66, which is the parallel of Acts chapter 7, only a little bit more specific. Isaiah 66, verse 1. Thus said the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you built unto me, and where is the place of my rest? Verse 2, for all those things hath mine hand made, and all those things have been, said the Lord. Revelation chapter 7, now listen very closely. Verse 9. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. The scene here is in heaven. Verse 10, and cried with a loud voice, saying, salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. Verse 11, and all the angels stood round about the throne, and about the elders, and the 4 beasts, and fell before the throne on their faces, and worshipped God. Verse 15, therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. Here it is referring to the temple of God, the true one, which is in heaven. Paul, in that temple of God, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, is actually referring to the temple of God in heaven. Verse 17, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. The temple of God in heaven. Now here's another verse which many have interpreted, so-called experts have interpreted as yet another reference to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, third temple of Jerusalem. They are wrong. They are wrong even in Revelation chapter 11, verse 1. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. Verse 2. But the court which is without the temple, leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. This also is being interpreted as being that of the third temple of Jerusalem. Apparently it seems that these so-called experts have forgotten or have not read verse 19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. Two Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Temple of God is the temple in heaven. It is no third temple of Jerusalem. Temple in heaven. The temple of God we read in Revelation chapter 7. But of course, this would raise yet another question. Let's read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed. This man of sin here is interpreted as that of the beast, the son of perdition. Verse 4, who opposeth and exalted himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This verse is interpreted as being that of the beast in the second half, or somewhere around there, second half of the, what many call the 7-year tribulation. Actually, the tribulation does not last 7 years. It would be this thing, this person who would sit on some temple of some third temple of Jerusalem. He would perform some blasphemous act, and he would even claim to be God. The problem is that apparently it seems that nobody has noticed that verse 4 is actually speaking of two persons. Who opposeth and exalted himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sit in the temple of God, is not referring to the son of perdition. It's referring to Satan. Because we have a parallel of this in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, which specifically speaks of Satan and not the son of perdition. This will be Part 2. Thank you.